What's going on, everybody? Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to walk through the track I posted last week, the Inside the Session. I'm going to do an Inside the Mix now. There's a few comments, got a few guys that were curious to see longer bits of that, and I will try to break down my thought process and why I did what I did and why maybe I didn't do what I didn't do. Anyways, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, leave comments down below too. Tell me what else you guys want to see. Let me know if this video helped you. Let me know what other questions you have. So now, let's get to it. All right, so I got the session up in front of me in Pro Tools. And I color-coded stuff to kind of just keep myself organized. I got some things grouped. I got drums grouped. I got the drum sends and drum snare reverb colored in light blue. I got my bass in orange, got all the guitars in red, got the two reverbs in purple, and got the master fader in bright green. So let's get you guys a little look into this. So I got MIDI drums, and I print all those. So here, let me solo those up. And this is what they sound like. Now, I do have a drum sub, if I mute that. I have a drum room and a parallel crush. So this is the parallel crush track. And on the parallel crush track, I have an SSL stereo bus compressor. I'm just doing a little bit. On the room, I'm creating another room out of an Ocean Way plugin, an EVQ, and an 1176, and I'm crushing that too. So that's what the feed sounds like without the room. Here's just the room. There's the EQ, and then there's the 1176. And if I add in the drum sub, that's everything. Now if I was to mute, there's just the drum sub. So that's just the drums, the raw drums. Of course with plugins on them. There's the snare verb added in. Now I'll add in the parallel crush, which is not really crushed on this one. You can hear how it adds a little more snare. I'll take it out again. Put it back in here. And now if I add the drum room that I created, I'll put it in right here. I'm going to mute it. Oh, let's go back to the beginning. Here's the drum room muted. Here's the drum room in. You can tell it adds, just makes the drums seem like they were recorded in a room. I'm creating a false room, a modeled room, however you want to, whatever you want to call it. So as for the drums, all I'm doing, let's start on the kick. There's kick with no plugins. Here's just the Studer tape machine added in. I'm hitting it hard on purpose on this one. I just liked the sound of it. And here I'm compressing it a little bit, just a little bit. And then I'm also EQing just a little bit and adding a little saturation. So again, here's no plugins. And here's all the plugins. Moving on to the snare. snare I'm not hitting hard. So the thing that, because I worked on tape, the transients you don't see on a VU meter. So when you record things like the kick, I purposely smacked, really smacked it. The snare, I'm not smacking it. I'm recording it much more like it would be on tape. -10, -7. Take all the other plugins off. Mute the reverb and everything. Actually, I didn't do that on the kick. So let's go back. Here's the kick. Just the kick. No plugins. Just the tape. So tape bypassed. Tape in. Yes, I'm hitting it really hard. Again, I went for a sound. Then I added in the compression. Compression off. Compression on. And lastly, the EQ. On the EQ, I'm just pulling out a little 360, adding a little 35, adding a little bit of top. So now we'll go to the snare. So the tape, there's no tape, so I level matched that because I wanted to know what it was doing. So if you listen to the top end, you'll hear it. Here it is in. Use a little top end. Then the compressor. Healthy amount of compression on it to get it to speak. No compressor. With the compressor. And then lastly with the EQ. Here's without it. There's with it. So I'm really brightening up that snare. I am adding quite a bit of 110 to add some thickness. Hi-hat, just a tape machine sim. Nothing special there. And again, not hitting tape it hard. You don't even see the meter moving because that's how you would record stuff on tape. Toms, get to a section where there is some toms. Let's do all the toms together. Here's all the toms together, just through the stereo bus. Just through the stereo bus. And now I'm cleaning them up like you would, like I would edit them. Basically, I'm editing them like you would edit toms if they were recorded for real with a lot of drum bleed, even though there's less bleed. Right when the kick drum, you can see the green kick drum right here. I'm muting after that, kind of fading out before the next tom comes in, tom 3, and then tom 5, which on this kit it was really tom 1, 2, and 3, but it was a 5-tom kit that I didn't use 2 of the toms on. So you can kind of see how I added those for tightness. And here's the difference with and without the rooms and the verb. Now if I add in all the rooms and the verb, that's your toms. Overheads, nothing special. Let me mute the extra stuff. This is just the overheads with tape. Didn't hit it real hard. And again, you can hear the effect of adding in the room and the crush or the other parallel compressor. Here's without it. Here's with it again. Effects is something that's in the slate drums. It's like this crazy, big, far back room. Here's room A. Again, just tape simulation on this, that's all. There's farther rooms. So I'm actually using a 2-room mics and a mono room mic in this. And in the mono room mic, I don't have kick and snare. It was an experiment I did a while ago on another session, and I just liked it. It added some size to what was going on. So let's go back to the chorus here, and I will mute the mono room mic and put it back in, and you can kind of see what it does. I'm going to start with it muted. Now I'm going to put it in. Here's out. In. Out. In. There's out. Here's in. So it's real subtle. A lot of these things are real subtle. All right, so let's walk through the bass guitar now. So the bass, I have an Ampeg amp. Play a little bit of this bass here. So let's go ahead and mute all the plugins. It's just the DI signal there. All right, so let's talk about the bass. I've muted all the plugins. We have just a DI signal. And I wanted this to sound amplified, obviously, like I recorded it through an amp. So there's the amp plugin. Obviously it's not gain matched because it's an amplifier. So nothing to real talk about there in terms of, comparisons. It's whatever sounds good, you're using a modeled amplifier. You can see the controls. I have the volume, bass, treble. I'm on channel 1, so it's the 1964 channel. Moving on, we have the Studer tape machine, so I'll play the bass again, see what the tape's doing. I do level match that pretty closely. Without it, with it. Then I move on to an EQ. Now the EQs I have on here are set a little extreme. I turned knobs, didn't look at what I was doing as much, and went for a sound. So here's the Chandler. It's without it. Here's with it. I went for focusing on really pushing the mids out on this and carving out bottom end, which I'm going to actually add back in with another EQ a little bit. Carving out a high pass 100 hertz, adding back in dB.5, adding in some 500, adding quite a bit of 1.2, a little bit of 3.6. And the next plugin is a compressor. I'm hitting the compressor pretty hard. I want this to be pretty even, and you'll see why when I add the distorted bass in on top of it. Here's without compressor. There's with compressor. Not quite level matched, but close. Again, without. And with. And then lastly, I have, well, not second to last, actually, Pultec. There's with it, without it. So I'll go back and leave this plugin up. If I open up the other EQ plugin, you'll be able to hear what I'm gaining from having that curve bender in earlier. Just Pultec in. There's without curve bender. So if you listen to the bottom end comparatively, with or without it, here's without curve bender. It's with it. Without it. With it. And then lastly, I'm adding back CQ. And I have a little bit of subs cut out, and I'm adding back in a little bit more 100, even beyond the Pultec. So without it, here's with it. So without it, with it. So if I go back now and add in the amplified bass, you'll see why I have that in addition. Here's the beginning of the track with just the bass. Now I'm going to add in the amplified bass here. Without it, here's with it again. Coming up right here. So for that sound, all I'm doing is I have a gate on it just to get rid of anything when I'm not playing. I have an EQ. Now, here's something to talk about. When you're running two channels of the same exact audio, because I just duplicated that bass, you got to be very careful with phase. So I have the phase flipped here because those two amplifiers are not in phase with each other. We'll go back and I'll show you the example. Here's both parts together. Now I'm going to remove the phase flip, coming up here on the downbeat. Here on the bottom end, change and disappear. Put it back in. Out. Phase flip. Something that's really, really important to check when you're using amplifiers, amp sims. Just always check your phase. And then lastly, I have how I'm getting the amplified sound on that is I'm using a suhr Universal Audio PT100 model plugin. So here's without the plugin. It's just a duplicate pretty much of the other pass. Sorry, there's just the bass alone on the amp channel. Here's adding in the dirty bass amp. Without it, with it. Regular bass, distorted bass, together. So that gives you the bass guitars. Now let's go ahead and I will show you the difference with and without the dirty bass when you have the drums in. No dirty bass. Dirty bass. No dirty bass. So it adds a little bit of grit, fills in a little bit of a hole. That's the bass guitar. All right, let's move on to the electric guitars now. I'm going to unmute them all. Let's see solo. I'm going to solo them all up as a group. Here's the electric guitars. Okay, let's go into these one by one. So we have the main guitars, and I'm basically doing the same thing to all but one of them. Little tape saturation, little bit of EQ. Here's the guitar recorded just as it was. There's the tape plug-in added. And then here's the EQ. So you can tell I'm adding a little bit of 2K, taking out a little bit of 300. And we're going to skip the next one because that is, right now, that's the melody sound that's treated differently. So let's go to the next guitar where this guy comes in. This is the double that comes in. There's as it was recorded, just a little bit of verb, mute the verb. There's tape, and here's the EQ. Let's go back. Now I EQ'd that one heavier, and the reason why is because the first track I used a Suhr 545, which is a reissue of the predecessor to the 57. Second track, I used a Royer 122, so it's a darker mic. So I used more EQ to brighten that up. Here's the 545. Here's the Royer 122. Together, let me go back and get them together. You can see they complement each other nicely. All right, moving on. Now I get into the little bits. Let's jump down to the chorus guitars. There's two different tracks. Most of it was the same pass. I ended up cutting and putting them on separate tracks so I could have crossfades, a little bit of a reverb tail on one versus the other. I do that for speed. It's quicker than automating that stuff in and out on a single track. Because I'm in a digital audio workstation, it's just faster. So here's the chorus. Here's the first guitar that doubles the original guitar. So again, I just studio tape machine. Let's mute the plugins on that. Mute the reverb. Studer in. And then let's go back. EQ, I'm using an API on this one. Taking out a little bit of 50 hertz and adding some 1.5K. And then some reverb. And so that pass actually continues on the next track, which is one up, which I just cut and moved up. It's just a double of the going back to the A section. And the reason why I did that is I have a different EQ setting. So that's why I split those apart. Rather than automating the EQ, I just treated it as a separate pass, even though it's the same take. And that guitar, we'll do the same thing. Tape machine. Here's without EQ. Here's with EQ. So I'm thickening that one up quite a bit with some 1.5K. Moving to the next B section, I have a third guitar that comes in to build, kind of like building blocks. I create more energy as the track goes on. And that is not hard panned. Same thing with the Studer. Let's go back without it. Here's with it. EQ, using a Pultec on this one. No Pultec. Here's with the Pultec. Without it. With it. Just adding a little bit of 5K and dipping a little bit of 300. Not a real big difference on that guitar. And then obviously adding some verb. So now let's get to the special little melody part. This part I wanted to sit on the top. So let's play that in the context of the track, and then we'll talk about how I got the sound. Let me back up and play the whole chorus or B section without it and then with it. Now here's with that part in. All right, let's talk about how I got the sounds. Here's just the part played solo. Oh, sorry about that. There's now on that one, I believe I used a fuzz pedal. Get a little bit of the dirt. Here's with the chorus now. Let me move that out of the way. Here's with the chorus pedal. Here's without the chorus plug-in. One more time with the chorus plug-in. And then I added a little EQ. Here's without it first. Here's with it. Just getting it to poke out a little bit, and then I compressed it some. Here's without it. Here's with it. And lastly, with the reverb. And finally, everything. So I hope that gives you some insight into how I end up doing things and kind of the sounds I was hearing in my head and how I got there. Okay, so let's talk about the master fader now. I'm going to take everything off of the master fader and play, let's say the chorus. There's no master fader. Let's go ahead and put in my stereo bus chain, my external stereo bus chain, which I'll put a screenshot up of. So now I'll take it off and I'll put it in halfway through. Without it. Here's with it. So I'm parallel compressing, adding a little saturation, and then compressing again, and I'm not hitting them really that hard. That chain, I don't tweak that much. I kind of leave it and mix into it. I very much, as soon as I finish tracking guitars, tracking bass, doing all the recording, even though I'm mixing as I go with plugins, kind of sculpting things to how I hear it in the end in my head, I'm thinking about what the stereo bus is going to do as well. And as soon as I'm done tracking, I put the stereo bus in and see what it's doing and mix into that. It's quicker, and it's my preferred method. I know that other people talk about it as well. Top-down mixing, I think Colt Caparoon calls it in his videos, and I totally subscribe to that as well. I definitely utilize that technique. So let's move on to the other plugins on the chain. I'm coming back from the stereo chain and hitting for this, since it's pop punk rock, I'm hitting 1/2 inch, actually 1 inch tape in this particular instance. So I'll play that same section here without the plug-in, and then I'll put it in halfway through. Now that's not level matched because I didn't want to hit the tape any harder, and I was thinking about the plugins down the chain as well. So I level matched it initially for the sound, and then peeled it back a little bit for the things down the line. Next, I EQ'd it a little bit on the stereo bus. This is without the EQ. Without the EQ. With. Adding a little bit of top end, pulling out a little bit of low mids, nothing extreme. Next, we move on to the limiter. So I'm going to bring up another plugin now that I have the limiter up. This I use just for overall metering. During the session, and then I start to set my levels. I also have this plugin in. So for delivery to the production house that I'm working for this particular time, they want stuff between -12 and -14 LUFS. That's where they want their delivery to land. 24-bit, 48K sample rate, but level-wise between -12 and -14. So even if I think the tune sounds better pushed to -9, I respect their levels and I deliver there. I will play with and without the limiter to show you what I'm doing with the limiter, but I'm going to leave the LUFS plug in, the Waves WLM meter in. So let's pick, we'll do the same section, the chorus here. So this is no limiter. I'm going to reset the meters and watch them. Okay, so I had a long term of -14, actually -13.9, a peak of 1.5, and the short terms, of course, going down. Let's reset it now, and I'll put the limiter in. So there you go. I'm pushing it to the hairy edge of, -11.9. The other thing they prefer is true peaks at -1. A lot of streaming requires that for the conversions so that you don't end up with overs on the conversion, the resampling. So that's why I deliver that as well. I'm going to go play that again, and halfway through, I'll turn on the limiter. I'll have the limiter out for the first half of the chorus and in for the second half. There you have it. There you have inside that mix. Again, you got to stick to the client's requirements, and you want the song to be used. Even if I feel like the song sounds better, pushed a little harder, it's a separate mix. It's no different than albums that have a radio mix and an album mix, and they weren't always the same. So don't box yourself into it's got to be one thing and one thing only. You guys have any other questions, comments, things I missed, things you think I did wrong? Throw them down there. Let's have a discussion. This is all, there's best practices, but this is subjective too. There's art involved, and there's things that people do differently, and that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be a competition or right or wrong. It should be, everybody encouraging everybody to have fun and create the things in their head and enjoy it. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop comments, ring the bell. It all helps the channel out. Thank you very much. And I will close this out with one more play of the song. I'll actually leave the WLM meter up so that you guys can see it.